Welcome back, and in this demo lesson you're going to configure S3 cross-region replication. So that's the replication of objects from one bucket to another bucket in different AWS regions. And the scenario that we're going to be stepping through is where you as a systems engineer are looking to configure replication to allow disaster recovery of an S3 static website from one region to another AWS region. So the first thing that I'll need you to do is to make sure that you're logged in to the general AWS account, and you'll need to have the Northern Virginia region selected. Assuming that's the case, then go ahead and move to the S3 console because we're going to be creating our source and destination buckets. Now, if you see any notifications about updates to the UI or any additional functionality, then just go ahead and close that down. What I want you to do is to go ahead and click on Create Bucket. Now, we're going to keep these names simple so that we can distinguish between the source and destination bucket. So for the source bucket, we're going to start with source bucket, and then I want you to use your initials, in my case AC, and then I want you to put a random number at the end, and I'm going to attempt to use 1337. For region, for the source bucket, let's use US-East-1, and then scroll down past the block public access settings, scroll down past bucket versioning and default encryption, and then just create the bucket. In my case, it successfully created a bucket using this name, and again, because of the globally unique naming requirements of S3 buckets, you need to make sure that you pick something different than me and different from other students. Now, the scenario is that we're using this bucket to host a static S3 website, so we need to enable that functionality. So go into Source Bucket, click on Properties, scroll down all the way to the bottom, and click on Edit next to Static Website Hosting. And we need to enable Static Website Hosting, and for hosting type, just make sure that you select Host a Static Website. Now we're going to use index.html for both the index document and for the error document. So enter index.html in both of those boxes, and once you've done that, you can save those changes. Now, so that this bucket can host a static website, we need to go to Permissions, and then we need to edit the block public access settings. So click on Edit and uncheck Block All Public Access. And once you've done so, click on Save Changes. You'll need to confirm that, so follow the instructions and then confirm. And this means that the bucket can be made public, but in order to make it public, we need to add a bucket policy. So to edit the bucket policy, scroll down below the block public access settings and then edit the bucket policy. Now, attached to this lesson is a demo files link. I'll need you to click that link, which will download a zip file. Go ahead and extract that zip file, which will create a folder, and go inside that folder. Contained within this folder are all of the files which you'll need for this demo. And inside that folder is a file called bucket_policy.json. Go ahead and open that file. So this is the file bucket_policy. This is a bucket policy which allows any principal, so using the star wildcard, to use the S3 get object action on this particular ARN. Now, this is a placeholder. We need to update this placeholder so that it references any objects within our source bucket. So I want you to copy this entire bucket policy into your clipboard, move back to the console, paste it in, and once you've pasted it in, go ahead and copy the bucket ARN for this bucket into your clipboard by clicking on this icon. And then I want you to select the placeholder that you've just pasted in, so straight after the first speech mark, all the way up to before the /. So select this component of this placeholder ARN and paste in the source bucket ARN. So it should look like this. It references ARN : AWS : S3, and then : and then the source bucket. So whatever you've called your source bucket, it should reference this. So don't use what's on my screen, use your specific source bucket ARN. And then it should have a / on the end. That means that any anonymous or unauthenticated identity will be able to get any objects within this S3 bucket, and that's what we want. We want this to be a public bucket. So click on Save Changes to commit those changes, and now this bucket is public. You get the warning under Permissions Overview that this bucket is public, and under the bucket name at the top, it will say Publicly Accessible. Now once you've done that, go back to the S3 console and we're going to create the destination bucket. We're going to follow exactly the same process. So click on Create Bucket. This time we'll call it Destination Bucket, and then again your initials, and then ideally the same random number. So in my case, 1337. Go ahead and click on the region drop down, and instead of picking US-East-1, this time we're going to use US-West-1. Now to save us some time, we're going to uncheck this block all public access while we're creating the bucket so that we don't need to do that afterwards, and we'll need to acknowledge that by checking this box. Scroll all the way down to the bottom and then click on Create Bucket. Then we're going to go into Destination Bucket, select Properties, move down to the bottom, and we'll need to enable static website hosting, so click Edit, Enable, choose the option to host a static website, and then just like before we're going to use index.html for both the index document and the error document. So enter index.html in both of those boxes, and then save those changes. Then we'll need to go to Permissions and edit the bucket policy, so scroll down, click on Edit for bucket policy. You'll need to copy this template bucket policy into your clipboard, paste it into the policy box, and again we need to replace this placeholder. So copy the destination bucket ARN into your clipboard, select from after the speech mark through to before the /, paste that in, and that will now reference any objects in the destination bucket, and go ahead and click on Save Changes. So now at this point we have the source and destination bucket, both of them are public, both of them are set to be static websites, and neither of them have any objects inside that bucket. The next step is to enable cross-region replication from the source bucket through to the destination bucket. So to do that, click on the source bucket, click on the Management tab, scroll down, and we need to configure a replication rule. So click on Create Replication Rule. We're told that replication requires versioning to be enabled for the source bucket, and we're given a convenient button to click to enable versioning on this bucket, and that's what we're going to do. So click on Enable Bucket Versioning, and this means this bucket can now be the source of this replication rule. For replication rule name, I'm going to call it Static Website DR for disaster recovery. We want it to be enabled straight away, so make sure the status is set to enabled. Now we can limit this replication rule to have a certain scope. We can filter it based on prefix or tags, and this allows us to replicate only part of this bucket. In our case, we want to replicate the entire bucket, so we're going to select the option that this rule applies to all objects in the bucket. So check this option. Now that we've configured the source, so we've configured the bucket name, the source region, and chosen the scope of this replication rule, now we need to decide on the destination. Now for the destination, we can use a bucket within the same AWS account, or we can specify a bucket within another AWS account. If we choose another AWS account, then we need to worry about object ownership. We need to make sure that the objects which are replicated into the destination account have the correct ownership, because by default they will be owned by our account because we will be creating them. We can specify as part of a replication rule that the destination account owns those objects, but because we're using the same account, that doesn't apply in this scenario. So we're going to choose a bucket within this account. Click on Browse S3, and we're going to select the destination bucket that we just created. So select the destination bucket that you created in the previous step, and then click on Choose Path. You're going to be informed that as well as replication requiring versioning on the source bucket, it also is required on the destination bucket. And again, you're presented with a convenient button to enable versioning on this destination bucket. So click on Enable Bucket Versioning. Just to confirm, versioning is required on both the source and destination bucket when you're using S3 replication. So that's the destination configured. We've picked the destination bucket and enabled versioning. So scroll down. Next, we need to give this replication rule the permissions that it needs to interact with different AWS resources. So this rule needs the ability to read from the source bucket and write those objects into the destination bucket. So we need to give this replication rule an IAM role which provides those permissions. So click in the Choose IAM Role drop-down and select Create New Role. You could select an existing one if you already had one which was pre-configured, but for this demo lesson we don't, so we're going to create a new role. Now by default, replication supports objects which are not encrypted or ones which are encrypted with server-side encryption and S3 managed keys. Now you can enable the ability of S3 replication to support objects which are encrypted with AWS KMS. You do have to select that option explicitly though when you're creating a replication rule. And in our case, we're not going to be replicating any encrypted objects using SSE-KMS, so we can leave this unchecked. I talked about this in the theory lesson, but you can also change the storage class as part of the replication process. So generally, you're replicating objects from a primary location or a source bucket through to a destination bucket. And this is often part of disaster recovery scenarios where you often want cheaper storage at the destination end. And so the default is to maintain the storage class that's used in the source bucket, but you can override that and change the storage class which is used when storing those replicated objects in the destination bucket. Now we're not going to set that in this demonstration, but you do have the option to do so. Now these are all relatively new features of S3 replication. So S3 replication has been a feature of AWS for some time, but over time they've evolved and enhanced the feature sets available to the product. So you're able to set replication time control or RTC, and this imposes an SLA on the replication process. So by enabling it, you ensure that 99.99% of new objects are replicated within 15 minutes, and this feature also provides access to replication metrics and notifications, but do note that this does come at an additional cost. Because S3 versioning is used on both the source and destination buckets, if you do delete an object in the source bucket, then by default that deletion is not replicated through to the destination. So by default, S3 replication does not replicate delete markers, and I've talked about delete markers elsewhere in the course. By selecting this option, you do replicate delete markers, and that means that deletions are replicated from the source through to the destination. For now though, we're not going to select any of these, just go ahead and click on Save. After a few moments, you'll be presented with this option. Now by default, S3 replication historically didn't replicate any objects which existed in a bucket before you enabled replication. You're now offered the ability to replicate existing objects within a bucket. So if you wanted to do this, if you had a bucket with objects that already existed, then you could replicate those as part of starting this process. Now our bucket is empty, so we won't do this anyway. So go ahead and select No, do not replicate existing objects, and click Submit. And at this point, replication is enabled between our source bucket and our destination bucket. So let's give it a try. What we're going to do is click at the top here next to the source bucket name, and this will take us to the top level of the source bucket, and we're going to upload some objects. So go ahead and click on Upload, and then click on Add Files. Now at this point, go ahead and locate the folder which you downloaded and extracted earlier in this demo lesson, so the Demo Files folder. So go inside that folder, and inside here, as well as the bucket policy template which you used earlier, you'll see two folders, Website and Website 2. I want you to expand Website and select both the aotm.jpg object and the index.html object. Select both of those and make sure you use the ones from the Website folder, not the Website 2 folder, and then click on Open. Once they're selected for upload, you need to scroll down to the bottom and click Upload. and that will upload both of those objects to our source bucket. Once that's complete, we can close down that dialog. Then I'll want you to click on Properties. We're going to move down to the bottom, and we're going to copy the bucket website endpoint into our clipboard and then open that in a new tab. So this is the source bucket website endpoint, and this opens animalsforlife.org, Animal of the Month for March, and this is a picture of my cat, Winky. So let's go back to the S3 console, move to the top, go back to the main S3 console, and then move in to the destination bucket. Now don't be concerned if you see something slightly different at this point. The time taken for replicating objects from source to destination can vary wildly if you don't enable the replication SLA option. In our case, because these objects are relatively small, they should be replicated fairly quickly. Now at this point I want you to go ahead and pause this video and wait until you see 2 objects in your destination bucket. Don't be alarmed if these objects take 5 or 10 minutes to appear. Just wait, pause the video, wait for those objects to appear, and then you're good to continue. You'll see that we have both of the objects which we added to the source bucket. They're both now stored in the destination bucket, and that's because they've been replicated using S3 replication. What we can do is go to Properties, move all the way down to the bottom, copy the destination bucket website endpoint into our clipboard and open that in a new tab. So this is the destination static website endpoint, and again we see the same website, animalsforlife.org, Animal of the Month for March, again my cat Winky. So next we're going to move back to the main S3 console, so click on Amazon S3 and then move back to the source bucket. Click on Upload again, and we're going to replace the objects that we just added. So click on Add Files, and then expand the Website 2 folder, and go ahead and upload both of these objects. So they have the same name, so aotm.jpg and index.html. Go ahead and upload both of these, and make sure you're uploading to the source bucket. So upload those. You'll need to confirm that. That'll take a few moments to complete. Once you see that the upload was successful, you can close down this dialog, and then you should still have the tab open to the source bucket. If you go to that tab and refresh, you'll see now that we have animalsforlife.org, Animal of the Month for April, and this is my cat Truffles. If we go immediately to the destination bucket and hit refresh on this bucket, you might still see the picture of Winky. If the image doesn't change, you need to keep refreshing it and just give it a few minutes, because without the replication SLA, then the time taken to replicate from source to destination can vary significantly. In my case, it took about 3 or 4 minutes of refreshers, but now we see that the destination bucket has been updated with the new image. Again, this is a picture of my cat Truffles. So this has been a very simple example of cross-region replication. At this point though, that's everything that I wanted to do in this demo lesson. So all we need to do is to clean up the account and return it to the same state as it was at the start of the demo. So close down both of these tabs and just return to the main S3 console. Select the destination bucket and click Empty. Confirm this by following the instructions and then confirm. Click Exit. With the bucket still selected, delete the bucket. Again, you'll need to follow the instructions to confirm deletion of this bucket. So go ahead and do that. And then we need to follow the same process for the source bucket. So select it and empty it. Confirm that. Close down this dialog and then delete the bucket. And again, you'll need to confirm that. Follow those instructions and delete bucket. Then we need to click on Services. Move to the IAM console. Because remember, S3 replication created an IAM role that was used for that replication. So click on Roles, locate the role which starts with S3CRR, and it will have the name of the source bucket as part of that role name. So go ahead and select the correct role. Make sure that you select the one which has the name of your source bucket, and then delete that role. And you'll need to confirm that process, and that will delete the role. And at this point, that's the account back in the same state as it was at the start of this demo lesson. So I hope you've enjoyed this demo and this simple example of how to use S3 replication, specifically in this case, cross-region replication from a source to a destination bucket. At this point, that's everything that I wanted to do. I'll be talking about S3 replication elsewhere in the course, in other associate courses, and at the professional level. So don't worry, you'll get plenty of opportunities to explore this specific piece of functionality available as part of S3. But at this point, that's everything I wanted to do in this demo lesson. Go ahead, complete the video, and when you're ready, I'll look forward to you joining me in the next.